Good Friday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com mailbag podcast brought to you by our friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Check them out at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com or on Twitter at blueh2o_climate with Jesse Simonton, Austin Price, and Rob Lewis. Brent Hubbs, glad to have you along with us as we jump into your questions. No surprise here, a good number of recruiting questions. So we'll start with Navy Guy 44. Austin, getting those names in for you to make you happy. So we'll start with you on this one. Is Tennessee going hard after Prince Kollie, or is he Munden's backup plan? UGA claims to be sitting pretty with Munden after losing Barrett Carter. Give us the situation, you guys, anybody jump in here, where you think they are with, A, the priority for Prince Kollie, and two, where are they with Smile Munden right now?
Well, as far as Prince Kollie, I think that, again, he's a product as far as Tennessee's concerned of not having camp. Had he been able to come and work out for Tennessee's coaches, he may be higher on the board, than what he is. They're still evaluating him. Obviously, they've offered him, but I do think that Tennessee sees him down the list a bit. That doesn't mean that he doesn't end up here, but I don't think that there's any kind of push to get him in the boat right now.
And with Munden, you think Georgia's in the catbird seat? Everybody's chasing.
Yeah, I think Georgia's definitely the team to beat. I know there's some quiet confidence from Auburn, but I mean, isn't Auburn always confident in every kid they're gonna? And sometimes they get those kids, but sometimes they don't. So, I think it's a three-team race.
Will, baby.
He will.
He will, baby. He'll
commit. I think probably sometime into June, in my opinion. And like I said, I think Georgia's the favorite. I do think it's a three-team race, much like it has been for several weeks between Auburn, Tennessee, and Georgia.
Don't you think this is just a case, Austin, where Georgia made him like Tennessee was quietly in the weeds, going along well there, and then Georgia realized they might be in a little bit of trouble with that one, and they really ramped up their efforts with him and got his attention that way. Not that Georgia was ever out of it, but I think there was a time where he maybe didn't feel like he was Georgia's as big of a priority for Georgia as he was for Tennessee. And I think Georgia changed that over the last month, 6 weeks.
Well, I think more than anything, I think Kirby Smart knows he has to land Smile Munden. I think he's an important recruit, much like Amarius Mims is an important recruit for Georgia. So, I think they turned up the efforts. Not to say that they were ever slow playing him or recruiting him slowly. I don't think that was the case. I just think maybe Tennessee at one point was the hungrier team as far as recruiting him. But yeah, Georgia, that they've always been there, and no surprise there.
All right, let's go to Voluptuous Booms, who's got a question to guys. With Naquan Brown committing on July 1st, are the Vols still pursuing him? If so, what are their chances there? I know he had Tennessee in his kind of final six. Tennessee, to me, Jesse, looks like they're down the list with this one here. And I don't know where he's been priority-wise for Tennessee.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, right, AP? I think he's just down the board. And so, yes, it's a blue chipper, it's a big name, but he's not a guy that even at a position that obviously Tennessee wants to continue to load up on some of those pass rushers. Not sure he kind of fits. I think they have some other guys, frankly, that they like a little bit better.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it's not a matter of, it's not a matter of, want here, more so than it is just a matter of kind of two ships going in two different directions. Tennessee has other priorities, and I think he's down Tennessee's board, or Tennessee's down his board a little bit. So, that one just doesn't feel like Tennessee's got much traction there, but it never has, to be honest.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Good Guy GBO. When should Tennessee know for sure an answer on Cade Mays? I know everybody said he's going to be good, but until it's official, I'm still nervous. Any thoughts on the NCAA's timetable on anything at this point in time?
No, I know some people that are close to the family, as Austin for sure does, and I mean I don't think there's any firm deadline. I mean, it could trickle. Something could trickle out at any time, but I think August is when you're looking at. and I know we've talked about it before, and Jesse has certainly said it. I think the track record of guys, when your family has the means to hire a lawyer, it's pretty strong. And that's, that's kind of what I fall back on. And also double up and say it's pretty easy to make the argument in the current climate that, with COVID and everything, whether it's true or not, moving back home is an argument that I think, has some legs and is tough to argue with. But my biggest thing is if you have an attorney, I don't think the NCAA wants any part of that.
Well, I agree. And let's face it, Tennessee had never even appealed Cade Mays until and to be honest, I don't know if they have it to this point. I know that once they tabled the transfer rule and as far as being a one-time transfer, at that point Tennessee ramped up their efforts. They already had stuff compiled and all that stuff, but I don't think they felt the need to do that if they were going to pass that new rule, because that's a lot of work on somebody to present that case. So I think that Tennessee has now ramped up their efforts, and the appeal, if it hasn't been sent in, will be sent in short order. But again, last year Tennessee didn't send in the appeal. Everybody kept wondering, where's the ruling on Aubrey Solomon? Tennessee didn't send that appeal in for the longest time. So I think it's much the same thing here with Cade Mays. But I do think we'll see a ruling sometime before Aubrey Solomon's ruling, which was second week of August last year. Third week of August.
Yeah,
so I think we'll see something before then.
Camp. It was well into camp.
Yeah, and I still wonder if the NCAA is just not going to be able to process all these anyway. And so if the guys who are moving closer to home, who've already transferred to another school, doesn't get somewhat rubber stamped, if you will, and moved on rather quickly in this whole situation, it would seem to me like that's very likely, or much more likely than in years past, because the backlog for the NCAA right now has to be through the roof. The Dumas Johnson kid, Austin, he's doing something in July. Tennessee,
No,
not a factor there. I don't see that I don't see that either. All right, who's the best quarterback in the class of 2022?
Well, I'm going to go with Ty Simpson. Having watched the kid throw last summer, I think he's the number one quarterback on Tennessee's board. And so in my mind, that's all that matters. We cover Tennessee. Tennessee's got their board, and he's at the top of it. So, I'll go Ty Simpson. Any of the other quarterbacks just don't pertain to me. So some kid goes to Southern Cal or Penn State, I just don't care. I would go Ty Simpson, having had many conversations with the kid. He's super articulate, super smart, understands the game. He's a typical coach's kid, just kind of loves football, and again, super talented.
There's a bunch of really good quarterbacks in the South in that next class too. Ty's one of them. There's a kid in Louisiana that's really good. What's the one kid's name that has Gunnar Stockton is a guy.
Great QB name.
Yeah, it's a fantastic name. MJ Morris. So
worked out well for Gunnar Keel.
Let's go ahead.
Wow. I'll say this: 22 and 23 are shaping up to be really good years for quarterbacks. When you start to look at some of the stuff that's out there, particularly in the South, you've got Ty Simpson. I think the kid at NBA's got a chance to be a really good player who's going to be.
Don't forget about Arch Manning, Hubs.
You got Arch Manning, who everybody's going to talk about. But I think 22 and 23 in the South are better than it's been the last couple of years in the South in terms of quarterbacks out there. All right, Vol wants to know, would you expect all three walk-ons who were put on scholarship last year to be back off scholarship next year as Tennessee works to the 85? Makes logical sense. I think that's a pretty simple answer to that one. I think to get to that 85 number, Tennessee they're going to have to do that with those walk-on kids.
So let's break it down. There are 5 kids that were walk-ons that Tennessee had added to the scholarships last fall. Those are 1-year agreements. So Tennessee can pull those kids back off at any time. Tennessee's going to pull those kids back off. The number was 92, but really 93 because we're going to count Jeremy Banks. So the number was 93 minus the 5 that takes you to 88, which means you got to lose 3. So who are those 3? Again, I think that somebody in that running back room, maybe multiple people in that running back room could come off the board. Especially with Tim Jordan, kind of opening that door for Jeremy Pruitt to make things make that decision a little bit easier. So, all those kids that kind of were put on, they're coming back off to get to that 85.
All right, let's look here at 8 always 24. Anything new on Mims? And is it possible Tennessee tries to squeeze in 26, 27 commitments, meaning obviously at that point you would be blue shirting some people? I think, Jesse, we've talked about this before we get to Mims. We've talked about this. That one-time transfer rule, if it goes into effect in January, how do coaches manage numbers? Rob, we've talked about this as well. Do you go 23, 24 and hold a spot? Does blue shirting become less likely moving forward with the one-time transfer rule in place? I think it does, because I think a coach is going to always want a scholarship or two in his hip pocket available for a transfer, but we'll see how coaches elect to play that out.
Yeah, and the other dynamic is just, and again, we're repeating ourselves some in prior statements, but does the NCAA decide to table the 85 hard cap number? Do they move that number, or do they move the 25 number each cycle, keep the 85, but say, hey, you can sign 30-something kids, or you can have, it's just how do you get to 85? I think that's going to play a big role in what coaches decide to do. As for this class, I think Tennessee's looking at it as, they're going to evaluate what the market kind of looks like transfer-wise, in January, February. But they're going to take as many good players as they think they can add. And so that seems to be kind of the philosophy right now.
Darius Mims, Tennessee, there was talk, Austin, at one point, maybe they had climbed up in that a little bit, and then, there's a little less talk about that now. I know Will Coxon and some of those guys have been talking to him. That doesn't seem to be as prevalent as it was in the middle of all the quarantine with COVID and everything else. Is Tennessee – how on the radar is Tennessee with the Darius Mims?
I think Tennessee's very much on the radar, but so are Alabama, so is Georgia. To me, if I was handicapping it, Georgia and Alabama would be the top two. I think Tennessee would be in that, in that next group of teams at maybe the 3-4 spot. But he's not doing anything until the fall. So, again, there's no super rush on that one. You just got to keep recruiting him and kind of see where things fall.
All right, let's go to Dirty Birds 14. Based on his avatar, he's the biggest fan of teams in the state of Georgia ever. His avatar is a Hawks logo, a Falcons logo, and a Braves logo in the state of Georgia. So Dirty Birds is obviously a
Jesse's burner account.
He's stuck down in the state of Georgia. All right, Rob, this one's going to you. If we can get through fall camp healthy.
No, you already said we, so it must not be me.
if we can expect to get through fall camp healthy, do you expect any upperclassmen, offensive linemen, or defensive linemen to explore a redshirt season? Would be nice to have a guy like Locklear ready to slide into a starting spot in 2021. Do you think Tennessee explores redshirting one of those guys, or do you think that it's moving on and continue to recruit past them in their recruiting classes?
Definitely see it on offense more than defense. Defense you can play so many guys. I don't see it on that side of the ball. Offensively, I think there are a couple of options, and I think it's so much easier to do now with the you can play in 4 games and still redshirt rule. And I don't think it will be obvious when they leave fall camp because of you can play in 4 games and still redshirt. So I think it's a real possibility, but I don't think I don't think you'll know until November, and it will depend on injuries.
Yeah, and I think it depends a lot on what happens with Cade. If Cade wins his appeal, then totally. I think it becomes way more realistic that either Riley Locklear or Jerome Carvin could be candidates to play for and be done and save time. You think about a guy like Carvin, he could end up being a starter by winning the job, but he could also be the kind of that odd man out where you don't really want to waste a full year for a handful of snaps.
Yep, and that's where the beauty of the 4-game rule can come into play in a positive fashion for schools around the country, and certainly Tennessee in this case.
Yeah, Carvin's a good player. We just rewatched the Vanderbilt game, and he played a ton, and Tennessee ran for 300 yards, but he's not beating out Trey Smith or Cade Mays.
Right, and he might be the center. You could look at it potentially as play him 4 games this year, get him some work at center, and he might be Brandon Kennedy's replacement at center in 2021 is a possibility there. But, you get an ankle sprain or somewhere along the way, then you might be in a situation where you can't, redshirt those guys. So I think the 4-game rule gives them some flexibility, and we'll see how they elect to play that. But Austin's right. I think it's going to be November before you have an idea on that. All right, let's go to 6 large ones. I'm assuming this is Travali Price, more likely to do something in the summer or fall, and is Tennessee in as good of a position as anyone else in McGee's top 5?
Well, Travali Price, I think he would do something August at the absolute earliest. But again, you got to remember he's got a brother. Jaden Tate is his name, and we had this in the war room last night. They're coming over here this weekend, much like Cayman Marley. Now, let me go ahead and preface this, and I'll put this in the war room. This is not Cayman Marley, where we're taping videos. I won't even see Travali Price while he's here. But they're coming over. They're going to just kind of, Tennessee will drop a pin. They'll go to a location. They'll FaceTime.
Story written.
No, there are no stories written. But you got the you got the brother.
Over under 2.5.
Oh, geez.
Go ahead. I broke your train of thought.
You got the brother. You got the brother who's going to be a factor in this as well. NC State's telling him he could be a scholarship guy. No one else is telling him that. So the key, the way to look at this though is if Dave Dorn is out at the end of the year, whoever comes in there doesn't have to keep those kids that are on scholarship. They can move them on. That's what Mac Brown did at North Carolina. That's what several schools have done over the last few years. So just because
Dave Dorn's buyout's pretty significant, though, man. This is the second time you mentioned he may be getting fired next season.
But here's the thing. But it may not be just him getting fired. He could
end up moving on.
He's looked around at other jobs if they have some success, which could be interesting there. Obviously, I'm sure Tennessee's throwing that at the kid as well. But that'll be an interesting decision that the Prices have to make.
Point is, I think if Travali was picking solely, it would be Tennessee over NC State. But with the brother involved, I think it murkies the water a little bit. And so that's kind of where I'm at with that. As far as Demarius McGee, Derek Ansley's done a really good job there. I think Tennessee is, I don't want to call them the leader, but I think they have as good a shot as anybody.
And I think he's a good football player. I think that's a guy whose evaluation is going to change moving forward. With rivals once he gets seen by people and things this fall. I think that's a guy that we have underrated at this point in time.
With Price, how much is Tennessee having to combat the fact, AP? Because I haven't talked to Travali. How much are they having to combat the fact though with NC State that even with State struggles as a team, they continue to load up and produce defensive linemen. Now, I know he's outside linebacker hybrid, but he's going to play with his hand in the ground a little bit. We know that they signed a couple guys just 2 cycles ago that Tennessee wanted several of those guys. C.J. Clark, Josh Harris, the Savion kid. So I'm just kind of curious about, how much Tennessee's having to kind of combat that. Yeah, Jeremy has his track record elsewhere, but it hasn't happened yet at Tennessee in terms of producing defensive talent.
Yeah, I think that's something that NC State's going to use to their advantage, Jesse. That's what they're going to be pitching. Not to mention the added benefit of something with his brother. But I think that being able to say, hey, look at this track record in the NFL draft the last few years. That speaks volumes, and that can weigh on a kid when you're talking about driving 3 hours and 23 minutes to Knoxville from Lincolnton, or driving 2 over to Raleigh.
Yeah, well, now Tennessee's come back to that a little bit is, hey, look what we did with Darrell Taylor in a year and a half. 2 years, look where we took Darrell Taylor to as a second-round draft pick, and he played part of the year hurt, but here's the guy, we didn't have him for 4 years to develop him. So there's all kinds of plays there, but certainly NC has had defensive success in the NFL draft. That's a reason why they continue to recruit as well as they have in the defensive front over the last few years. All right, Volunteer to 87 wants to know top 3 redshirt candidates that were 4 stars in 2020. I don't even remember who all the 4-stars were in 2020. I think when you look at red shirts in the 2020 class, I think Austin, Jesse, Rob, anybody wants to jump in here, some of those young offensive linemen, are going to redshirt in this class because it makes the most sense.
Well, I mean,
given some of
Cooper makes the most sense because, I mean, you can play 4 games, still redshirt. You got Brandon Kennedy in front of him. You got other guys that have played center. You mentioned Jerome Carbon just a little bit ago. So, I mean, he makes a ton of sense as a 4-star. But, I mean, I think they're still going to rely on a lot of those freshmen, wide receivers, Tyler Barron. Those guys are going to play.
I just pulled it up, though. Dominic Bailey's probably going to redshirt.
Okay.
I mean,
you
think Bailey's going to crack the rotation in a defensive line?
Probably not.
I don't think so.
Probably not.
I think that, and again, some of these ratings we can quibble with them, whether we think they're up or down. French. I don't think both French and McDonald play more than 4 games. One of them will, but I don't think both of them will.
To me, McDonald makes the most sense because I think he can be more of a factor on special teams.
Agreed. We've discussed the safety spot. I'm just kind of tossing out candidates here. We've discussed the safety spot. Does Danico Slaughter crack the rotation, or is he a guy that just plays just a bit, gets his feet wet just 2 or 3 times, and then he redshirts? So those would be kind of some of the candidates in terms of looking at the list here, who are ranked 4 stars by Rivals.
All right. Volunteer 87, I believe, lives in Greenville. He just needs to focus on his Green Devils finding a high school football coach.
All right, let's go to our burger here. Hallmark of former Chavis teams was churning out great speedy linebackers. Is Tennessee getting back to that? With the discussion of the success of Henry T. his freshman year under Pruitt and Ansley, do you see linebacker recruiting picking up? Is this class starting to get the talent at the linebacker position that former great Tennessee defenses had at the second level? I think what's interesting about that is for John Chavis, many of those guys that he recruited that were, quote, great linebackers, and they were really great linebackers, weren't high school linebackers.
They were running backs and safeties.
Yep.
When you talk, Al Wilson was a safety. Dominique Stevenson, I remember thought he was going to be running back. Was he in the same class with Jamal?
Yes. He was.
Westmoreland was a great high school running back. Eddie Moore was a great high school running back. I think Jeremy part of it's the 3-4, but I think Jeremy likes way bigger guys than Chavis. Is kind of what jumps out at me.
But I will say this, in this class, Jeremy Pruitt's taking a little bit of a smaller linebacker. It's not the 245, 50-pound guy that he's taken currently in this class. There's a little more speed involved with Lewis.
You mean 21 with
Lewis?
Yes,
in a 21 class with some of those guys. I think there's a little bit of a size shift in terms of it's almost like they've relaxed their weight parameter a little bit in what they want at linebacker, but they're not going out and recruiting a bunch of 180-pound, safeties, 185-pound safeties that they're going to play 205 pounds at linebacker like they did with Westmoreland, Ryan Carl and guys like that, under John Chavis. But I do think when you look at this linebacker class, speed is a bigger factor than size is based on what you're seeing in the 21 class. It looks a little bit different than some previous linebacker stuff has looked.
Yeah, but
in my opinion.
These 2 guys do, but I think overall Jeremy likes bigger dudes than we saw with Chief.
Well, no question.
Henry T. is a big dude. J.J. Peterson is a big dude. Quavaris Crouch is a big dude. Those guys, Quavaris in particular, can run, but I think the template, and again, I think part of it is the 3-4. He wants bigger guys.
Yeah, I think that, and I think because of the 3-4 that's certainly the case. All right, Lanham 13. What is the most important stretch this season next year in order for people to consider it a successful season? Is it Oklahoma, Florida? Is it Alabama, Georgia? Of course, the schedule changes a little bit, but when you look at the schedule, what's the 2 or 3 weeks that's the most important, you think, for this team?
Oh, I think it's Oklahoma, Florida.
I'm going to say, I think you just can't take a step back. I don't think you have to beat Oklahoma or Florida. You can't lose to Vandy, South Carolina, Missouri, or Kentucky. 8-4 is fine. 7-5 is a step back.
It's an interesting thought. I hadn't really looked at it that way because everybody sees it as, which one of those big four you're going to win type deal. But is it more important to win one of those four, or is it more important to establish yourself that you're closing in on those big four and you're not taking a step back, losing to, the South Carolina,
Missouri,
Vanderbilt deal? That's an interesting, Kentucky, which is more important.
You go 8-4, that's a step forward. I mean, gives yourself a chance to win 9 games, with a bowl game. I mean, I just think it's way more damaging to lose one of those, South Carolina, Vandy, Kentucky, than it is to there's nothing wrong with getting beat. But we're talking about team Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama, all been in the playoff in the last couple of years. In Florida, won 10 games back-to-back years. I don't think there's any shame in losing one of those 4.
All right, let's go to GoVols 2019. Is Wilcoxon holding strong to his commitment? He was one of the peer recruiting guys, so important for Tennessee. Notice he's removed some of his Tennessee stuff from social media. Would be a huge loss. Where's Tennessee with Kamar Wilcoxon right now?
I think he's fine.
Okay.
I mean, again, you can't base everything off Twitter. But
AP, his Twitter bio. What are you going to do?
Everybody rides that wave. They ride the wave, and sometimes it ends up being right, sometimes it doesn't. But I mean, you ride the wave. Did you ride it back up to the top of the wave when he tweeted out on Thursday that, Derek Ansley was his main man? Again, if you watch Twitter, you'll sit there and drive yourself nuts. It's almost like, if you're looking for something on the internet, you can see whatever you want to see.
No, there's no doubt about that. 8always24 back with another question. Jesse, if the staff decided it wanted to take Trey Curry's commitment, would he even want to do that now? Or does does he still want to be involved? Is there hard feelings there because Tennessee didn't take his commitment when he tried to go public?
I mean, obviously the way the situation was handled I guess just to say that kind of have that public embarrassment was not the best. But ultimately these guys, they're looking for the best spot for them, just like Tennessee's looking for the best players for them. And if that becomes a marriage down the line, I absolutely could see Trey Curry saying, yes to being involved. Part of his big he wants, he's has admitted that, the idea of playing close to home is very intriguing to him. So if these things come together, I don't think that he's going to turn up his nose because he wasn't allowed to commit. Again, if it had been handled a little bit differently, perhaps no one would have been none the wiser. So.
All right, Peyton for Prez, top Tennessee high school football players you've seen in person, regardless of if they played college football or where they played their college football. Top couple guys you've seen in person. I'll say this, Rob, I think you and I went together. We went and watched Patrick Turner play in Nashville. And that was about and no offense to Patrick Turner, but that was about as underwhelming of a 5-star performance on a Friday night as I've seen. They didn't get him to football. Austin Rogers was the better player that night, which was kind of crazy. But anyway, that's a whole side note. Best high school football player in the state of Tennessee you guys have seen.
I got 2 easy, really. I mean, Jason Witten, just phenomenal. Playing middle linebacker, we're number 1. I'll never forget that. And very up close and personal interactions with James Littleman Stewart. He was a pretty good player.
Did he run you over?
I don't know that he actually ran me over. He definitely ran by me several times.
Those 2 I watched in person, both really good. I thought Harrison Smith was really, really good in person at Catholic. Those battles that they had at Fulton with Dennis Rogan were some of the best games at that level that I've watched. But he was really, really good and really good at making the tough stuff look easy. T. Higgins did much of the same, but he didn't have a ton around him at Oak Ridge at the time. And then I don't know, flip it to the West. I've not watched as much in person in West Tennessee.
Same here. I mean, I've seen some state championship games, but not, don't have as much. I mean, we're missing some great players from out that way. Todd Collins, Jefferson County, back in the day, was
I'll tell you this: the Friday night Jerry Colquitt and Todd Hilton went at it in Oak Ridge with Central and Oak Ridge, with Sean Summers on the field and Big Richard Howard out on the field. There was pretty good football going on that night as well.
Todd Hilton I saw Todd Hilton and Central play Morristown West in the playoffs back, I guess, in the early '90s. It's a little man and Hilton doing that. That was a great game. And Kippy Bayless was a really good high school player, running back at Central.
Hubs, you not go drop a Kenny Chesney reference on that?
No, I'm not. We've all seen the footage of him at senior night, but that's about the only footage anybody's seen of him in any
So he
videos.
played at Gibbs. Hubbard, do you know would he show would he played at Gibbs, but would he show up wearing like different Knox County high school jerseys during the week?
That's terrible. All right, let's go to Peyton for press. He's got one more. Crompton seemed bitter. Crompton seemed bitter on the podcast this week. Was that targeted at Clawson or Fulmer? I would say yes, and add Cutcliffe into that mix. Would be my answer to that question there.
And also Clawson's frosted tips from the GQ from way back in the day.
I don't think that was a good marriage there for those couple of years. And the final question from Barry Duvall: is there a set date when a decision needs to be made for whether fans will be in the stands for the home opener Saturday, September the 5th?
I don't think there's a set date, but I mean, I think that there are kind of target dates in mind internally that they want to, it's kind of like Hudson Wolf. I'm like, and talking to Hudson Wolf, this date, date, the 13th, he goes, that's not the date I'm announcing. That's just the date internally I wanted to have it done by. So I think much like the same, thing here, I think internally they want to have some semblance of an idea, much like, local superintendents will have a target date in mind on when they're going to announce whether they're going to try to do face-to-face interactions at school this fall.
I think you got to get somewhere by August 1. I think you got to have a pretty concrete plan August 1, because it's going to be difficult to execute if it's not a full capacity availability crowd, because everybody's wanting to know, do I, my season ticket, I'm a student, all of those types of things. I think you're going to have to get to somewhere to say, hey, this is our plan. They have multiple plans, but I think you're going to have to unveil whatever your plan is by the 1st of August, because that's going to give you a month to get everything together and to deal with the gnashing of teeth of people who are going to be left out.
And think about things, like you're going to be ordering, like you're going to be stocking concession stands. I mean, that's stuff that, are you going to stock it for 30,000 people or 102,000 people? I mean, that's why
will you stock it at all?
Yeah.
I think they'll stock it.
I mean, what do you think, Jesse? August 1 at the latest?
Yeah, because the other thing we haven't mentioned is then they got to figure out the thing that, what about tailgating? How do you handle about, all right, X amount of people are in the stands, but how do you handle, you may have another 50,000 people that just want to come hang out outside of Neyland. And how do you handle that? And is there a way that Tennessee thinks they can make some money off that?
Put some screens up.
Screens up, or you selling some? I don't know. I mean, these are conversations that are being had all across college football, but especially in the South, in the Big 12, where it seems like they're going to play as designed.
Yeah, and again, Georgia had some. I guess Georgia leaked out or released some documents. It was like a 50-page document on various potential thoughts and plans out there as well. Everybody's doing the same. I do think you'll have to get somewhere in another month and a half so that everybody has an idea of what to do from a worker standpoint, fan standpoint, and everything else. Hey, if you're in East Tennessee and you need a reliable heating and air system company, a heating and air company to come fix any problems you have, your maintenance service, whatever, you need my friends at Blue Water Climate Control, veteran-owned, family-operated. They're going to send out an expert to take a look at your system, not a sales guy, but the expert's going to come out and tell you what you need. Whether that's a major repair, a simple repair, whatever you need to make your home more comfortable with heating and air conditioning in the summer, heating in the winter. They're going to lay out all the options for you. That includes repairing the system or replacing it, whatever is most affordable for you to improve your energy efficiency and your indoor air quality. They're going to do it for you at Blue Water Climate Control. Give them a call at 865-299-2290. Or call them at or visit them at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com to make an appointment. Blue Water Climate Control is an authorized dealer for American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. For Jesse Simonton, Austin Price, and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us on this Friday for the Volquest.com Blue Water Climate Control Mailbag Podcast. Have a great weekend, everybody.